Cool. Hello. Happy Saturday. Um, Today I wanted to explore some things about there's this whole cluster in a lot of spiritual teachings and New Age groups and like yoga and so on that talk about they'll use language like energy and frequencies and resonance. Um, and I'd noticed that there's something like I can see why, like having encountered pretty vividly what I think they're talking about, I can see why there's an inclination to use that kind of language. And at the same time, it's a little bit confusing because the yeah, sure it's vibrating. um, but a lot of the time I don't experience it as vibrating. It's more like a sensation. Like, is tea vibrating? And I guess in some theoretical sense, but I don't experience the taste of tea as a vibration. So I'm looking down at my hair and noticing, oh, this is a complete mess. um, it's going to be time to organize it a little bit. So there's a set of practices. What I want to do is share some aspect about how I've come to understand this stuff a bit differently. I still find myself wanting to use language like energy and frequency and vibration, mostly due to a lack of something better. Um, and in particular, embodiment. Okay, because I titled this video about energy and embodiment. Uh, a lot of this language about like get in your body, get out of your head. I have a much clearer understanding of what that is now, and I'll probably continue to develop that understanding. But there's a vividness to my experience of it, and I think that there's a clearer way of talking about it, about the embodiment and the energy stuff, all of it. And I think it's actually interwoven. It's in some important sense the same thing. So a while back now, I've lost a little track about when. God, a month and a half ago. Uh, I'm a little unclear about this. My intuitive sense of time has been a fair bit off um, since the Mexico trip. But there's I've been playing with a practice based on Taoist self-cultivation practices. There's I noticed there's a way where there's a topic and direction and explanation that is a little bit of a tangent, and I think is important, and I may risk talking about it at some point. But it's one of these things that like, it's more forbidden than the most horrible atrocities in the world to talk about. Um, Referencing these questions about how you work with sexual energy. Um, if you actually talk honestly about it, that's very likely to get your post banned, your video banned, etc. We talk about shredding people's skins off while they're alive, but we can't talk about pleasure and creative power the way that it's actually experienced. So I have to be a little bit careful because it's a bit of a tangent, and I don't want to run into trouble with my account having some sort of difficulty because I'm stepping into forbidden territory for the culture. But but noticing there's a gesture in that direction. Like if you look in Taoism, there's a lot in there about how to cultivate certain kinds of energy, whatever that is, and circulate it through the body. One thing I kept finding as I dug into this area is a reference to something called the microcosmic orbit, which on the face of it looks like it's presuming some kind of magical energy, chi, that moves around on the body somehow. Why? We don't know. How does this map to Western medical models? We don't know. Maybe Western medical models are wrong. Maybe it's a nervous system. Maybe it's really blood. Who knows? If you just have faith, it'll work. There's a lot of unnecessary confusion. I think there's a way to make this a lot clearer. But as the story goes, you have chi, and this chi flows along meridians. And there's a pair of meridians that govern everything else. In the Chinese system, you have 5 elements, in contrast to the Western 4. With these 5 elements, it's what wood, earth, metal, fire, and water. I'm getting the order wrong, but whatever. And each one has a yin and a yang version, and sort of inward or quiet or feminine version, and then an outward, expansive, bright, quote-unquote masculine version. And so that corresponds to 10 of your meridians, a yin and a yang for each of the 5 elements, and each of those meridians corresponds to an organ in the body. But you have 12 meridians in total in the Chinese system. So what are the remaining 2? Well, different texts call them different things. Also, translations are tricky between languages. But they're the central and governing meridians. One, which essentially split your body in half. Like one goes up the back, and the other goes down the front. And the microcosmic orbit is that you take this magical chi energy and you cycle it through those 2. You get the 2 meridians to connect, and there's a natural flow. This is supposed to create immense rejuvenation and energy and tremendous healing and trigger all kinds of stuff. It's like all kinds of great things. One of the main reasons I was looking at it is because I have there's a whole philosophy arc here. If you want to dive into some of the background for this, I would not for the meridian stuff, but for the topic I shall not go too much into here, at least in this video. I would recommend looking at Kim Anami's work. It does a beautiful job of really honoring the nature of sexuality and how we interact with our lives. And that's just like an example point. But I was looking at how there's something very important about cultivating a certain kind of, again, for lack of a better word, erotic energy. And I kept running into a very practical physiological problem with this, where if there's too much arousal for too long, a lot of men have a very particular kind of physical discomfort. Classic term is blue balls, but there's an actual like tension. There's some kind of difficulty that goes on there, and when there's more, as the story goes, if you move energy more freely, like with the microcosmic orbit, and in Taoist context, the microcosmic orbit is in part designed to move specifically that kind of stuck energy. It's supposed to relieve the tension, right? So some kind of meditative practice. So I won't go into the why for all of that right now. I do think it's an important and powerful topic, and it relates very closely to a lot of the things I had described back in August. But there's, but part of the main thing I wanted to focus on here is in the microcosmic orbit material, there's a lot of emphasis on spending weeks meditating on specific points of the body and really feeling what's going on there. Really, really feeling. You start behind the belly button, like the sea of chi. So at that point, you don't need a lot of theory, and you don't need a lot of, you don't need a philosophy. You don't have to believe in chi. You just pay attention to what's there. So one thing that I have noticed in the time of cultivating this is something I've noticed a lot in my own martial arts training and in other kinds of practices, which is that there's a kind of, I want to describe it as a numbness of the body that's sort of the default. When I would teach workshops and emphasize people getting into a sort of mindful experience of their own bodies, and I'd say, okay, can you feel how when you take a breath, can you feel how the air that is in your lungs is colder than your body? I mean, when that's true, but like it's almost always true. Almost nobody is in an area almost like most of the time, most people spend their time in air that is less than 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's very easy, if you learn how to pay a certain kind of attention, to just feel the cold air. I remember this being a bit of a challenge, and I had to focus on it. And after I focused on it a bit, I realized, no, I can actually feel the sensation. My experience had been that when I'm teaching people this, that they can usually pick up on it after a little bit. But then there's this extra trick, which again I remembered, oh yeah, this took me a long time, of noticing, oh, I can feel my heartbeat in my chest. And inviting people, can you be still enough to really feel your heartbeat in your chest? And most people can't at first. Now, my experience is that once I could, it wasn't just, oh, I'm imagining it, and because I'm kind of like, am I imagining being able to feel my fingers? Like, there's not a lot of room for question about it. It's very vivid. It's just da 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 da. Right now, it's a little faster. I'm honestly not sure why. I feel pretty calm for the most part. But there's this vividness of being in actual touch with what my organs are doing. In this case, my lungs and my heart. I notice when I focus behind my belly button, so right around there is going to be mostly the intestines. I happen to know that because of the mental map. But when I think about the mental map, I'm not in touch with the sensations of the body. If I actually pay attention to what's behind the belly button, I have a very similar experience to when I was first trying to notice the feeling of the temperature of my lungs and the feeling of the rhythm of my heartbeat. In the sense of, if I focus really carefully, can I? Is there anything there? Am I making it up? I can't tell. And that's what's true. That's what's true. Right? So, in the course of doing this, I've come to discover that it's vividly possible to increase sensitivity. So now, it's far from perfect. I can tell how much I'm out of touch with what's going on with my organs. Let's see, if I lean back a little bit, does this have the sun not? Okay. I'm vividly in touch with what's going on with my organs now. But I can tell how much I'm not as well. I have difficulty feeling what's going on with my liver. I can't even find my pancreas. But I can very much feel my stomach. I can feel large parts of my intestinal tract, but it's like, and somewhere in here are intestines. It's a little funny. I can feel my adrenals. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know about my adrenals, but I can feel the kidneys, and I happen to know the adrenal glands are sitting on top of the kidneys. So I can feel that back there. Just like right around the bottom back of the rib cage. You can just like feel what's going on there. So this to me is highlighting something about how much of a connection there really is between what's going on inside the body and what I have conscious access to. I don't want to make a claim that this is the same as embodiment. I think this is just a curiosity that I find very, well, it's not just a curiosity. There's some very important reasons why this might be a very good thing to do. And this has been very enriching for me, because I've noticed that when I can tell that I'm kidding myself, right? Or that I'm ignoring something important, when I'm having a conversation with my girlfriend and I'm about to, or I'm getting into some sort of thing about, well, that doesn't make sense, and like here's the theory about how the weather patterns actually work, and when that interacts with this part of the population, then you should expect this to happen. So I don't think this theory can be right. It's not that any of the words or the concepts are a problem, but there's a kind of tension that I experience in my solar plexus and a little bit lower. There's a tension experience there, a kind of contraction that matches with my sense of knowing that what I am saying is not connecting me with her, is actually disconnecting, and it's not in relationship to where she emotionally is. When these programs, when I have this thought of, oh, I've got this theory I want to share, I go, here's how memes work. This is something that I think caught me an awful lot in August. I can move forward and I'm safe. Like in, like it's there's this vivid picture of the world that I can see very clearly, and that I claim any mind can come to see, because it's not just a fabrication in my head. These patterns are observable in the same way that a mathematical theorem is. There's something very important, I think, I vividly feel, I feel it in my body, about when the theory becomes more important than the social connection. When the theory, and saying the theory, and asserting a point of view, and completing an arc, and saying an argument becomes much more the point than is the context in which the words are being said. About why I'm saying them, what is the motive force, what is the actual engine behind it, the emotional engine. I talked about bits of this back in August. But he talked about it with an understanding of, well, here's the theory and here's how it works. Actually living that, living the theory of, well, how do I actually pay attention to what matters moment to moment to moment? It can't be from more thought, because the thoughts, as far as I can tell, they just want to complete themselves. What I find is that I have to feel what's happening in my body each moment, and notice, well, when I think a thought and I have a theory to say, how does my body react? What do my organs do? What does the tension do? What are the actual lived sensations? When I do that, I find it much easier to track why I'm saying what I have to say. Like what's motivating me in the first place. And with that, whether I want to continue. And in particular, in the language I was using before, am I being possessed by a meme? It's much easier to feel than it is to intellectually notice. Memes operate on the intellect. They're like software programs. They're like viruses that just kind of run. And I notice them just sort of taking over my thoughts and my energy and wanting to move forward. But one thing they can't do, as far as I can tell, just this is pragmatic. I don't have deep theory for this. This is just what I observe. The kinds of memes that seem to create trouble for the world, get people really riled up about, like, do you agree with this political perspective? Are you going to stand with Black lives? Are you going to, like, the guns rights activism? Like whatever it is that possesses somebody. I want to emphasize it's a different question from whether it's good. Whether it's good and whether it possesses are two separate issues. I just noticed part of the reason I'm laughing. I just noticed the reason I said that is out of fear of having to get into arguments with people. And if I notice that and I breathe into it, I actually don't care. I don't want to upset people, but if somebody wants to get upset, they're welcome to it. So when those things that possess people in general, that I observe possessing people in general, they operate on a very intellectual level, and they use the power of the body, but they can't They can't kill the body. They can't actually make the body numb. What they can do is encourage the mind to stop caring about the physical sensations. So I notice that when I get really into some sort of argument with somebody and I really want to make my point, my attention is going to my point instead of to what am I actually experiencing in my body. If I prioritize being aware of the body's sensations, I can notice when a meme is doing that. And if I can decide from the body, I'm a little less sure how to capture that one, but there's absolutely something about deciding to follow a course because it's true instead of because it makes sense. Often those two are the same, but where they differ, the mind has lots of reasons why it's important to do what makes sense. But the body, my experience is that my body keeps with what's true, what's here, what's physically real. And it's very in touch with what is physically real. So so looping back to this bit about energy and frequency, I'm not going to go into this as much as I'd originally thought I might today. So maybe I'll continue. I'll find out what happens tomorrow. When I listen to a piece of music and it touches my soul, how do I know it touches my soul? There's this wonderful song by Shinedown that really touches me a lot. How Did You Love? Like it often chokes me up listening to it. No one gets out alive. Every day is do or die. The one thing you leave behind is how did you love? How did you love? So the whole song has this emphasis on, life is finite. What matters? But it's not just the idea. There's something about the musicality, the poetry, the whole thing. It touches me. How do I know it touches me? It's not because I figure out it should. It's not because my mind understands. It's because there's a sensation that happens somatically and energetically. This is where we get into this question of, well, what is energy? But the level at which I can know that I'm happy or know that I'm sad, I don't know it because of a sensation on my face from my lips smiling. It's not that mechanical. There's something more subtle going on, but it's not so subtle that I'm clueless. It's not, oh, it's magical woo-woo. It's very vivid. It's very there. Where is the sensation of joy? Where is the sensation of anger? It's not just in the fists. It's not just the tension in the belly. There's something else going on. There's something that moves through the body, but is experienced in the body that I find defines what these emotions are. The modern Western world doesn't have a consistent name for the level of that sensation. Subtle is the closest we get. In occult traditions, this gets referenced as the subtle body or the etheric body. Like you have a physical body. There's another body that is the body of sensation and emotion. Like, what is that exactly? We don't know, but we experience it. I'm not meaning to claim something ontological about, something about the nature of what's physically or existentially true about, are there two bodies? Are there multiple bodies? Is there this mysterious energy? How does, physics doesn't find it? Well, that's fine. That's cramming, it's sort of a premature cramming an experience into a model. I agree. I don't know how emotions fit into physics. I have some guesses. Something brain chemistry projection illusion something. I don't know. I don't know how you fit it in, and I don't care because the question, I mean, I do care. I'm curious. I want to know how it fits. But physics, the model of physics, isn't the basis of my experience of reality. The model of physics is an idea that we use to make sense of things in a way that we can talk about, that produces some good effects, some reliable effects, I should say. Whether they're good or not is up for debate. I mean, not all of them are good. It's very clear. But that but I don't live in the world of physics. I can, and it's annoying. Like there is something very interesting about intentionally entering the world of physics where I bring up this model and I let my mind project over my experience all the time so that I'm feeling things like, oh, here's this water bottle and I'm feeling its weight. What's that weight? That weight is a force from the earth pulling down. And when I push it away, there's an opposite and equal reaction that moves my body away a little bit. And I can kind of feel that, but there's also a way where when I do that movement, I'm moving the earth, but it's too infinitesimal for me to really notice because my nerves aren't set up that way because blah, blah, blah. This is a theory. It's a story. That doesn't make it false, but it's not what I experience unless I'm actively hallucinating it with my mind. What I experience, this fabric, this discussion, I can feel my glasses on my nose. This is what's here. This is what I'm experiencing. So when talking about energy, well, you know, there absolutely is a level at which I don't know how it works, but I experience it. I don't know how it works in terms of this model of physics. But if I stop thinking in terms of physics, I still experience it. People who don't know the physics theory of color still experience color. Right? We don't really have a great way of explaining in a coherent way, as far as I know. Maybe somewhere someone does have it, and that would be interesting, but again, I don't care. We don't need a coherent physical theory of emotion to experience emotion. Whatever that layer is, whatever that level of experience is that is emotion, where there's this subtle sensation that, like when I kiss my girlfriend, there's this sensation on the lips, there's some sexual arousal, there's like a relaxation and a leaning in, and parts of me tense, but there's something else too. Something like the pleasure of it. Even when I say, you know, like a stirring of erotic force, like that's a kind of energy. It's at a more subtle level than the raw physical sensations. Maybe it's built on the sensations, but that isn't how I experience it. So when I listen to a piece of music, how do I know, like that Metallica, like I'm listening to Metallica, how is it that that is different from Mozart, right? That you have metal different from classical. Why do we have genres of music? How do you know that a piece of music fits in a genre? It's not because of a mental analysis. My experience is that the pieces feel different. So when talking about energies and frequencies, like I think there's something very important here because my experience is that the body, when I attune to the body, when I pay attention to the sensations that are here, I can use my body like a radio, and I can tune in to certain frequencies more than others. And I can notice when my body is picking up radio stations that are different from the ones I intend. when I'm feeling, like the world's terrible and it's scary and we're all burning into a kind of hopeless oblivion and all of Western civilization is collapsing and maybe this is good, but we're all going to starve and climate change. And okay, so there's a way that that feels in the body. And that's tremendously different from the feeling that lets my body be a channel for connecting with a human being and saying, hi, how are you doing? So I want to wrap up right about here. This has been rambly. So learning, but one way to express what I'm doing with this whole series is I am practicing tuning my body radio to certain frequency radio stations and then letting that flow through. And if I can sort of get out of the way, so to speak, then I expect there to be a more natural flow. Some of this has to do with attuning my body, including the energetic body, whatever that is, but like getting my emotions to have more, and my emotional isness to have more room to let this frequency speak more clearly. Then I expect what I have to say to come across more clearly, and more importantly, for your body to feel it, for what I say to ring. That's the level at which it seems like change happens, learning happens. It doesn't happen from thinking things through, or if it does, it's because the thoughts result in an energetic shift, whatever energy is, such that the body changes. It changes how it moves, it changes how it anticipates, it changes what sort of frequency it's tuning into. So in this space, I find myself going, we're lost in metaphor. That's part of why I say I don't have a better word set than energy, frequency, etc. yet. And maybe I'll just define them in a special case. I don't know. We'll find out. But I'm unconcerned. So where I had originally hoped to go with this was talking a little bit about tuning into the frequencies of archetypes. And to me, this is exciting. This is really exciting stuff when we talk about spirituality and magic and myth and what's fantastic about fantasy and fiction. I think this is what we're talking about. But I want to wrap this up here. So I'll call this a day. If you happen to be listening to this, as far as I know, no one's listening, and that's totally fine. I'm not doing this for others. But if you've been listening and you feel like engaging, thanks for listening.